Well, welcome everyone. We are at the final step of our budget development process. So this is our budget hearing. So this is an opportunity for us to share with the public the work that the board and the administrative team have done to pull post budget together for the 24-25 school year. And at the end, if there are any questions, we will entertain questions from the audience. So tonight we'll review our district mission, our proposed budget, how that will look on the projected tax rates for the town, what a contingency budget might look like and what that is, and then what we'll be asking of the voters on May 21st for the budget vote and board member election, as well as some information on the electronic voting and early voting and our feedback survey that we have available for everyone. We'll give you a little bit of a summary and then close with the details of the day. So every year we start with the same slide, which is our mission statement. And it drives all of the decisions that we make all the way through all of the budget codes and the additions and deletions. And if you are attending board meetings or watching presentations from the building, you will hear this referenced throughout all of the building presentations because it guides our strategic plan, our DEI work, and then the work that is happening in the buildings. So this is no different, and this is always in the forefront of our minds when we're making these decisions on our proposed budget. So this year, for our property tax levy, we do have or propose a compliant levy. The growth factor is 0.0007% with a CPI of 2%, which is the maximum. We do have about $863 of allowable exclusions, which are items that the community has voted on in the past, which allow us to exceed in that 2% and add that in. Our state aid is based on the legislative budget that was released mid-April. We do have an increase of about $1.4 million, or about 5.3%. Almost all of that is in foundation aid, which brings our foundation aid up to $18 million, which is a significant increase over where we were several years ago, getting us up to be fully funded in the current year. Expense-based aids are reimbursements that we get based on certain expenditures in the prior year. There were some fluctuations within them, but overall they netted out to about $57,000 increase. And then this year the state maintained the UK funding. So typically we had half-day programming with $355,000 in our grant, and that was doubled so that we could expand to full-day programming, and that stayed in the budget, so we will again have that this upcoming year. Our transfers, or funds that support our budget outside of external revenues, is about $206,000 of reserves. We have that typically every year, $60,000 for tax certiorari and $20,000 for unemployment. That is consistent from year to year and is offset by equal expenditures on the other side of our budget. And then we also have an allocation of about $127,000 from our debt service fund. Those are funds that we received during our previous bond closing, and we use them to reduce our burden on our taxpayers. In addition, we continue our $1 million fund balance allocation. We have an expenditure line of $1 million, which gives us flexibility in our budget for unplanned or unknown expenditures. And as you can see, the total allocation from one year to the next is fairly consistent, which is what we like to see. We don't want to have overly large growing dependence on our reserves, because then eventually that becomes unsustainable. Overall, our revenues are projected to increase 4.3%. with a revenue budget of $78.8 million. On the expenditure side, we have about 3.6% increase in personnel. Those are contractual obligations and do include any negotiated contracts that have been closed this year, as well as the proposed staffing changes that we'll talk about in a couple slides. Our benefits are increasing. The ERS rate increased up to 15.2, which was just over the 2% that we're expected to absorb in our budget without affecting our tax cap. So this was the first year we had a very small add to our tax cap exclusion of 1.1%. TRS was staying fairly level, it went from 9.76 to 10.02. FICA Med is the same rate, but is increasing because our salaries are going up a little bit. And then our health insurance is increasing just over 7%, up to an overall budget of about $9 million. And then our workers' comp premium is doing very well. We don't anticipate any increases in that premium. General support changes are very minimal, about $18,000. There's some fluctuations between liability insurance and some different operations increases that were needed, as well as some decreases in our utilities. Over the last couple of years, we needed to increase our utilities, and now those are coming back down to more typical levels. We did maintain the contingency line. This year it's $2 million, and it will continue to be $2 million. And $1 million of that is offset by the fund balance appropriation that we talked about. The instruction is increasing 13%, about $766,000. And this is the area of our budget that takes care of all of our programs, our charter tuitions, our special ed tuitions, our health services, athletics, technology, and we have our SRO costs as well as the building security that we have in district. We have a security officer in every building. BOCES is an increase of about 5%. Again, special ed increases, athletic memberships, some miscellaneous increases in smaller areas. But we are maintaining our technology replacement cycle. Several years ago, we started IPAs to kind of get that ball rolling. And now we're at a point where we don't need the IPAs anymore because we have a budget that can sustain the replacement cycle without needing to borrow those monies. So it's in a really good place. Transportation is increasing about 10%. We do have an increase of 8% on the general lines. We did add a bus run this year, which was needed to take care of some special transportation need for some specific students. And then there's an increase to our gasoline purchases as those costs are pretty high. And then debt service has a decrease of about $300,000, which is just our schedule for debt, which was accepted. So our staffing additions. In Smallwood, we are adding another section at grade 2. So we will have a new teacher and a teacher assistant. And then we're adding back into our budget summer programming at the high school and middle school levels. So for the last several years, we've been funding that program through our stimulus grants. And now that those grants are done, we're adding this back into our budget. Similar programming that we had prior to COVID. The elementary level didn't need to have that added into the budget because we were able to incorporate those expenses into our Title I grant. And then we had one change in a title in district office in the area of technology, and the increase to cybersecurity is really just a reflection of the changes that are happening all over with technology. So overall, we have a $3.2 million increase in spending with a budget of $78.8 million or a 4.3% increase. So each year, some of the requirements that we need to share with our voters and our community is our budget is broken down into two different formats. The tripartite budget and the component budget. So the tripartite budget compares your administrative expenses to your capital expenses to your program expenses. Program being your teaching, your student supplies, your tuitions. Obviously, we want the majority of our budget going there, which it is at over 77%. The component budget is very similar, but breaks it down into 5 categories: general support, instruction, transportation, employee benefit, and debt. And again, you can see instruction is the largest portion of that budget. Each year, we allocate $100,000 in our budget for outlay projects. Those are small projects, small maintenance projects that we can do throughout the district without needing a separate vote or going out to borrow, because we include the financing right in our budget, so we don't have to borrow. So this current year, we are using money from the 22-23 budget to do 3M film on the first floor glass at Windermere. And then next year, we will continue working our way around the district, and we're going to do the windows at Smallwood. So overall, we have a balanced budget, $78.785 million, which is a requirement that we propose. In previous years, we had included some estimated increases in state aid in years 2 and 3. This year we did not. This was the first year that districts were held harmless if they were already fully funded, but they did not get an automatic 3% increase in aid. So we didn't include any increases for us in future years, just so that we can see what it would look like with our current spending and the anticipated revenues. So we do have budget deficits in the following 2 years, but that'll be something that we continue to watch and monitor as we go through next year's development process. So what will this look like for the taxpayers? So we do have an increase in our property levy up to $40 million. And we don't have the new assessment rates for the town, which we do know that they're going through a new assessment for all the properties. But using last year's assessment, if it were to stay the same, we would have a 46-cent increase per $1,000 in assessed value. So this is similar to where we were last year as well. And then our rate actually came in a little lower because the assessed value increased, which would be the same this year. If the assessed value of the town increases, that rate decreases. So a contingent budget. So what happens if we put our budget before the voters and it does not pass? The board would have a couple options. We could go out for a revote. We could go out for a revote with the exact same budget, or we could revote a new budget, or we can adopt a contingency budget. If we went out for a revote, either the same or a reduced budget, and it failed, we would be forced to adopt a contingency budget. So what would that look like? That would mean no increase in taxes, so the 2.11% would go to 0, but we would not be allowed to have any community members or groups use any of our facilities. Everything would have to be instruction only. We wouldn't be allowed to purchase any new equipment. No non-essential maintenance would be allowed to be performed. No capital expenditures unless it was an emergency repair. And then no non-unionized employees would receive increases in salaries. And all of that would result in a decrease of spending from the 3.2 that we have proposed down to 2.7. So we'd have a $78.2 million budget. So on our vote day, we will ask everyone to cast their ballot on our budget of $78.785 million, which is tax compliant. There are 3 Board of Education seats with 4 candidates running. We have electronic poll books this year, which we had last year as well, so that you walk up, there's an iPad, they take your name, they flip it over, you sign. It's much easier and much more convenient. As well, this year we also have early voting. So if an individual needs an early ballot or an absentee ballot, they can contact Ms. Custodia, our district clerk, and then she can help them through that process. If any community member is interested in providing feedback to the district, not only on the budget, but about anything district-wide, programming or budget, finance, anything, there is a community feedback form on our website. It's live year-round, and when you submit a survey result, we get an email, so we see your comments and your suggestions. So it isn't limited only to an exit poll on our budget day. Our budget focuses on the health and safety of our students, supports SEL needs of our kids. Everything is either being maintained or growing. There are no program cuts and no reductions. We added summer programming into the budget for the high school and middle school, but we'll also be running it for the elementary school. It just didn't have a budgetary impact. We did receive a significant increase in state aid, which allowed us to close our gap and present a balanced budget for you. And the proposed levy is tax compliant. if the budget passes, we do not need to adopt a contingency budget, but we continue to allow our community to use our facilities as they do now. May 21st, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., South Gym of the high school. We will be there all day. Happy to see you come in. The budget and 3 seats for the Board of Education with 4 candidates running. Absentee ballots and early ballots can be requested from this custodian in the district clerk's office. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
First, just on the BOCE, what is IPA? And then when you said it's about the technology, continued technology replacement schedule. What's an IPA?
An IPA is an instructional installment purchase agreement. So it allowed us to buy, it's almost kind of like a lease. It allowed us to buy 3 years worth of equipment, but only pay for 1 year of it up front. So we had the payments over 3 years. So instead of having a $200,000 project, we could do a $600,000 project and pay for it over 3 years.
I see.
So what we did just prior to COVID, or maybe during COVID, we added a new IPA every year, so that as one fell off, we could add a new one. But we're at a point now where we don't need to do the IPA because our budget is sufficient enough to be able to make that larger purchase to do the replacement for all the kids' Chromebooks without having to spread it out over 3 years.
It was just the alphabet that was confusing.
Yes. Education likes to use the alphabet.
I have one more question. I remember back in December talking about, this is to the charter school tuition, that line was increasing $195,000. How much does the district spend towards reimbursing charter school tuitions?
It changes every year, and that rate is set by district by the state. So this year for us, it's $11,866 for general education, K through 12. If a child is receiving additional services or special education services, consult teacher or push-in services, that's above and beyond that.
And how many students is that? Like, are we currently paying tuition? Did we pay tuition for last year?
This year we have between 48 to 52 kids. It definitely fluctuates because they move in, they move out, they try a charter, maybe they come back to district. But on average, we have 45 to 50 kids.
Has the district ever surveyed those parents, like why the parents are choosing the charter schools over
I don't know if a specific survey has been done, but the families register with us every year, so we're meeting with them annually to talk about their educational choices as well as what needs they have to support them in those choices. So there definitely is communication there. I don't know if we've ever done a straight up survey of asking them why they're choosing that over an in-district building or any other educational facility.
Okay. Thanks.
But
One last question.
yeah.
In terms of community use, I just want to clarify, so Scouts, like PTA, PTSA would be deemed community and therefore would have to pay district for use of the buildings for the...
We would have to charge for all the operating expenses, the electricity, the heat, like we don't charge for those things now. Some of our groups that maybe are for-profit, we do have a fee structure set up for the use of different spaces. But for our nonprofits and some of our community groups, there aren't always those charges, but we wouldn't be allowed to do that anymore. It would definitely be impactful on our community. Well, if there are no other questions, I will conclude the budget hearing for this year and turn it over to President Steinle.
Great, thank you very much.